People who've seen someone get fired on the first day, why were they fired? New substitute teacher fired on day 1 for writing "Be Quiet" in Sharpie onto kids' foreheads. This is wrong on many levels, but it is funny. I worked in a kitchen and a new guy came in. I asked him to grab something from our cleaning supplies storage, which was in a shed out back. He was gone for a while, so I took a look at the cameras and he was smoking a blunt while peeing in the shed right next to the cleaning supplies. Yeah, honestly, I'm not surprised. My first kitchen job had a sea can out back for storage, and the cooks used to get me to watch the door while the two of them crushed a 12-pack every morning in 10 minutes or less. They had my ass doing fireball shots and smoking doinks with them half an hour into my first shift as a dishie. Thank God I don't have the Deegan bone in my body, but some places are just like that. 17-year-old me didn't mind. It wasn't even a bar, just some diner that was really popular with the trucker and church crowds. The blunt probably seemed like a no-brainer. I can't explain the pissing though. Probably just absolutely shit-faced. I honestly liked working in a joint like that because no matter how hungover I showed up, I was still the golden child. It let me live my best 18-year-old life. It also kept things interesting. Highlights include guy always eating out of the dish bins despite my constant offers to make him whatever he wanted. He just liked soggy bread. I guess new hire that was an obvious meth head and a 5 feet 1 inches mouthpiece got into it with me during the dinner rush and decided to follow me when I took the garbage out one night. Old Turkish prep cook sees him follow me out and follows too just in time to see buddy take a swing at me. Prep cook helps me throw him in the dumpster. 20 minutes later, a waitress comes in from a smoke and says he's sitting out back crying. Opening short-handed at 5 AM. And I'm helping my only help make a fort out of the bread racks because he's too drunk to stand and insists he just needs a nap. Line cook wearing a Rolex to work showing off the receipt for $20K. At the job he made $12 an hour at. He is in prison for 3D printing gums and selling Drew Gus now. I eventually moved on and worked at actual decent restaurants, and it was such an adjustment. I kind of miss the chaos of working at a dive. Your guy would have fit right in there. Worked in a chemical plant as QC. To make it short, I was one of the chemists who'd check if the products were good enough to leave the plant. A guy working in production came for his first day. He took his break and he lit a cigarette next to a 10.000 liters acetone tank. He was out before I could even blink an eye. I remember my old construction company firing a group of guys because they wouldn't stop smoking next to the propane tank cages. They made an alternate smoke pit and everything. They were just too lazy to go around the corner. Insane stuff. Homeboy was allowed to play music on Bluetooth for the restaurant on the first day, went to the bathroom and started watching porn and forgot he was still on the speakers. Hilarity and dismissal ensued. Dishwasher. First day on the job, went on break and went to the bar next door. Took a while to come back, so chef went and found him. We needed a dishwasher bad and he was actually pretty damn quick at doing dishes. Chef gives him a second chance. Second day, goes on break again and stops at 7/11. Gets a tall boy of Mike's Hard and starts drinking it right outside the back door. We have a picnic table right outside our back door for staff to eat smoke. Chef finds him again and fires him on the spot. Sad part is, my chef probably wouldn't have gave a shit if he was always drunk. It was the fact he didn't even try to hide it. I was bartending at a sports bar in Hell's Kitchen. New guy training first day, supposedly several years of experience. He attempted to shake a Jack and Coke, and of course covered the bar in his mess. Didn't come back for day 2. Worked with a bartender who asked, "What's in a rum and Coke?" Someone just asked for it. That bar was known for hiring dudes cause they were pretty, not because they knew what they were doing. He didn't last the weekend, though. Kid lied about his experience as a foreman and drove a skid into the side of the house we were working on. Forks straight into the siding. It was hilarious lol. First day, it guy made his computer's desktop wallpaper a FB pic of a female coworker he had just met. Reminds me of a story I heard. Dude was hired as a tester in the department. Apparently he made an Excel file and ranked all the women in the company. There are a lot, from most to least fuckable. He didn't realize that the OneDrive was shared with the entire company, over 300 people, and clearly said who had created the document LMAO. He was a first day blackjack dealer. He took in $5 cash and exchanged it for a $500 chip. The lady stared at him for a good 20 seconds, picked up her chip and left the building. Gaming took his badge shortly after. I hired temp for data input. Her first day a guy pulled me aside and said, "She can't be here. Apparently one of our full-time employees had a restraining order against her." I sent the employee home and apologized, then called her agency and told them she was not welcome back. Not sure what the order was for, but my guess is stalking. I worked as a staffing firm manager for 18 years. She definitely knew where he worked if he had a restraining order on her, and she didn't turn down the job. She could have always told us, "I can't do that one as my ex works there." Better than us losing a customer because she failed to tell us, and now client is like, ex agency sends out girls with restraining orders. Let's not use them again. Was in the local Walmart needing to take a leak. Walked into the bathroom to a manager and employee staring down a stall covered in sheet. The manager was explaining to the dude that cleaning sheet is in the job description. The guy responded, "Well, I'm sorry that this is my first day, but duck that," and walked out. Our town's brick mayor forced his spoiled brick son to get a job at a restaurant where I worked. On his first day of training as a host, the kid sat in the waiting area looking at his phone instead of standing behind the host's stand greeting customers. The trainer tried to sort him out a couple of times, but he'd just greet one customer, walk them to their table, then go right back to sitting. The manager came to talk to him. Then the kid sighs, says, "I can't do this," and heads for the exit. They told him if he was going to walk off his shift he shouldn't bother coming back, and the kid just waved on his way out. He only lasted a couple hours. I was a bartender and amp. It was his first day of training. He smacked my ass when I was bent over to get ice. I flipped out on him and amp. He got fired in front of me. He got drunk at a company-sponsored happy hour and tried to convince some of his new co-workers how cool it would be if they could, and proceeded to describe sexually assaulting another employee at the event. It wouldn't have mattered who it was, but the icing on the cake was she was the VP of marketing. My boss is the director of ops, direct report to CEO out of 3 total. A few new hires see her first day also and do a "who's that piece of ass" type thing, and we laugh so ducking hard. Buddy, she will cut your gonads off for breakfast. It's funny cause like she's not a hard ass or anything, but her entire career has been in a 99% male dominated field. You crack that joke and she makes fun of your hairline and sends you to Saudi Arabia for your first trip. My first day was also the first day for another dude, who showed up an hour and a half late. After being there for about 15 minutes and sort of starting helping me do the very first task we were assigned, he gets pulled into an office and fired. On his way out, he is walking past where I'm still working and he says they fired me for being late. I can't believe it. "Do you think you can give me a ride?" I laughed out loud and sheepishly said, "Sorry dude. I'm kinda working right now." He thanked me anyways and walked out the building. He accidentally did me a big favor because so many of my new co-workers saw that interaction and thought it was so incredibly hilarious, they all became immediately friendly with me to talk about it. I've had to fire 2 people for trying to fight people on the first day. One dude felt threatened by everyone surrounding him like he wasn't sitting right next to our clock and device. Started throwing slurs and trying to force some reason fight the only guy who wasn't surrounding him and was just sitting down enjoying his lunch. The second guy wasn't following safety rules and got mad when someone called him out on it. He got into a screaming match with the guy saying he's been doing this for longer than the other guy's been alive. He was a 20-year-old talking to a 50-year-old man who had been doing this work for 30 years. I realized he might be stupid and fired him. Mortgage company, 2017. A manager hired in from outside, not an internal promote, meets his team. I am on it, probably only 4-5 people at that time, but one of them is a very well put together lady. She is younger than me, and I am younger than the manager guy was. She was super sweet and in no way interested in any office romance, let alone a guy probably twice her age. Literally at the first meeting, right after she introduced herself and said her name, he responded with, "Wow, you're a looker, we should smash. You'd like it." And then he 100% gave the rest of us a Michael Scott look, realizes what he has said is awful, but we just have to marinate in the silence that followed. The victim left the room, quietly, told the district manager in the next room over what happened, and the new guy was fired immediately after his welcome. Fired an employee on their first day when I asked them to turn on their camera for a call, and it wasn't the person I interviewed. I have so many questions. I work in tech. Web software development. Pretty everything went remote when COVID hit and we really didn't have the best practices in place to screen out total frauds. Role in question interviewed in Zoom with 4 people at the company. Passed. Day 1. It wasn't that person who virtually showed up. The most amusing part is that our VP was from around the same part of the world, and when this developer joined their first meeting, camera off, he was immediately called out for having a different accent than the person who interviewed. The camera requirement, we do all meetings on camera, just made it very clear that it wasn't the same person. I was working at a large-scale architectural firm in the Bay Area in 2004 and they hired a new guy, and after his orientation and paperwork he finally gets to his cubicle. The first thing he does is puts on his headphones and blasts death metal, Cannibal Corpse, so loud that everyone can hear, and that's him using headphones. However, that was not got him fired. His first work item was to write a company-wide email that said Debbie Harry of Blondie was responsible for 9/11 and wrote about 30,000 words for it. I have never seen our HR manager run out of her office so fast. New hire called in on the first day of orientation, tells them she can't start work until next week. Quarantine. The day she was supposed to return to work with Dr. Note. Worked a couple of days. She called in again and said 2 weeks before she could come back to work. Hurt her back. She worked the first 2 days after her leave was up and called in the next day saying it would be another week before she could come back to work. At that point they had reviewed some security footage for law enforcement, unrelated, and caught her stealing. Not from the company but from another employee. She was fired. 2 days later her husband shows up to surprise her at work with a homemade dinner. Boss has to deal with it. Apparently she was telling him she was working out of hours for the last month and a half. Fighting with a customer by getting in their face and yelling at them. The dumbest thought the company owed him loyalty for being an employee. Oh boy, wait until he learns. Edit. For clarity, this guy was 100% at fault. He was damaging an item the customer bought. The customer politely asked him to be more careful, and that was all it took for the guy to snap. This man got to live the dream of every retail worker on his first day. Man speedran a retail career lol. I have a cousin who was fired from a gas station, his first job, less than a month after starting there. If I remember correctly, this was during his last year of high school. He was definitely still a minor. Anyway, the first couple weeks of his job, he kept talking about how much fun it was and how much he loved it. Apparently, he had never met the owner yet, only the manager who hired him. The owner was back in his native country or something like that. So, the owner of the business returns on a day my cousin is working, and he immediately starts giving my cousin grief, yelling, and berating him. This lasted only a couple of minutes because my cousin just punched the owner in the face. From what I have been told, he socked him pretty well, too. Long story short, all that happened was he was fired. His dad was an RCMP officer and was able to make the situation go away. This took place in the late 90s or early 2000s. My cousin is now a lawyer, and he still to this day says that it was the best day on the job he has ever had. My first job for me at a bank. Just finished training, 3 days, and coming in for the first real day of work, and a guy who had been training with me showed up absolutely plastered. I don't mean hungover, I mean like rancid smelling, 100% still shit-faced. I didn't know him that well, don't remember his name, but he did not appear to be a party guy or anything over the last few days. He had showed up on time and everything. He didn't even get a chance to put anything in his cubicle to clear out. Our direct manager told him to go to HR immediately for his termination, and that was that. I still don't get the logic that was going on in his head. If he got like that, just don't show up and make some sort of an excuse or something. It is a bad look to miss a first day, but it cannot possibly be worse than the option he took. She openly bragged to her manager she was amazed she passed the drug test. They even gave her the "yeah, I didn't hear that" line. She repeated herself louder. Stupidity mixed with young naivety. Kids just entering the workforce really need to remind themselves that they aren't interacting with their peer group after school anymore. I fired a man on the first day for incompetence. I work in it. He claimed to have years of experience, but even after I showed him how to edit a text file in Notepad, he couldn't do it. I have a funny one, and it was working in technical support. I'm using technical support in a much different way, where if a mechanic can't fix something they can call technical support from the manufacturer, and potentially a corporate mechanic will come help fix stuff at the actual location. I was a tech support mechanic for a relatively small marine electronics company and was also the main sales rep in my area and just was the go-to man for this brand in a region. I had said multiple times we needed another set of hands, and finally HR called and said they had someone, and he started that day. A guy showed up in khakis and a polo shirt. I was wearing trunks and flip-flops with a dirty company t-shirt, as this was a marine business in South Florida, and they had sent me a straight-up tech support guy. HR didn't realize what they were hiring for, and the poor guy didn't realize what he was applying for. Honestly, it went as good as it could have. I told him I could use the labor, and if he was good with the pay I wouldn't bring it up while he looked for the job he actually wanted, and he tried his hardest for a couple months until he had a new job, and at the end he thanked me and said he had a really nice work vacation because he likes working with his hands in his free time, and it was a really fun experience. I taught him how to fish too in our free time hanging out at the docks. It could be a goofy buddy comedy if it wasn't such a lame subject. I got fired at the end of my first day of work at a small gift shop in a national park. Apparently I was supposed to show up for my first day of work knowing the entire product line, where it was located on the shelves, how much it cost, and where everything was in the storage room. The other employee, who was the golden girl and had worked there for 3 years, refused to help me learn and spent most of the day sitting out back getting high. The kicker was, the owner had spent the entire day upstairs watching the security cameras to see how I was doing, and knew that the other girl wasn't there doing her job. On the plus side, the owners of a nearby restaurant had been in the shop and we had chatted while I was trying to find the item that they wanted. They hired me to work reception in their place because they figured that if I could still be pleasant and chatty while having an awful day, then I would be perfect to greet their customers. It ended up being a good summer. I was a Black Friday hire at Best Buy. I had a week to get up to speed. Absolutely no one showed me what to do, or answered my questions. I spent the days wandering around and trying to familiarize myself with product and prices. On that Wednesday I found I'd be on register, which no one would show me how to work. I turned in my ugly shirt with their logo and wished them well. Several people cursed me out as I left. Too bad. So sad you shouldered done your job. And, my employee discount still works, so I came in on Black Friday and did some shopping. Lol. Not the first day, but because of the first day. The dude randomly threatened to kill me. Just introduced myself and literally the first words out of his mouth were, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to slice your neck with this," then shows me a metal scraper. Then when I was at the supply closet he just took off my hat and tried to play with my hair. When I pushed him off, again he told me that he was going to kill me. I wrote a complaint against him. Luckily I had witnesses. He was fired. I was later told by a friend of his how mad he was towards me, but luckily I never saw or heard from him again. I was working as a valet for a hospital. We hired this older guy who was kind of weird but seemed pretty chill. Later that day, he asked one of us if the hospital if the gift shop inside sold cigarettes. Obviously they did not, so the guy literally ran to a turkey hill about a mile away to get some. Our boss was told this happened and was perplexed that this guy actually left like that. He came back and our boss talked to him about not leaving the job like that. The guy told our boss to suck his ass and he was fired that same day. Gotta love those summer part-time jobs. I was working at a bookstore in a small town and they hired this guy to be a bookseller cashier. On his first day he asked if he could set out a stack of zines that he and his buddies made together about the environment. I didn't read it so I don't know specifically what it was about. The owner of the store said sure, why not? So he put out a little stack. We learned later that day that he had no work experience, did not like to read books, and he just spent the whole day trying to sell his homemade zines to customers. He did not return to work after that. He also did not sell any zines that day. Print company didn't like me as their current printer operator because I wasn't fast enough. Ignore that, I was the only printer operator for 6+ industrial machines and graphic designer. They hired a new guy with a lot of printing experience under the guise of helping out, but the writing was on the wall. I was 100% training my replacement. He spent the entire day complaining about our processes and how our flatbed printer was ancient, refused to work it. Refused to work our paper printer as that was beneath him. They tried to reason with him and he wouldn't have it. Demanded the shop to spend $100K on a newer modern flatbed so that he can work. Suddenly after firing him, they don't have an issue with me anymore. I actually do my job despite how stretched thin I was. Could have had someone much worse. First day at McDonald's and they stole $20 from the till because they didn't bring lunch that day. Was so dumb because we got free meals on our lunch break. At a nail salon, they said they had experience, certificates, and had been nominated for a national award for their nail art. Couldn't even do a basic manicure and got frustrated and screamed at the manager when she questioned them on it. Used to work in a brewery. Guy got fired for drinking milk in the bottling room. It was actually more complicated. The owner saw him selling weed on his lunch break, but the milk thing was also bad, but not as bad on paper. They wrote down milk on the paperwork. This was also around the time they were trying to get loans for expansion and stuff, so I'm sure that played a part. I was a bartender for a day, never got called to come back in. The issue was that a customer reached behind the bar to show me how to make his drink. They knew I had no experience and my trainer left me there in the first hour to go outside and chain smoke cigarettes. The owner sat at the bar and watched me struggle and fired me for letting the customer help. I'm glad I got fired. Dude got a job at a Fortune 250 company as a direct report to a direct report of the executive committee. Was likely at least a $500K job. After his first day, he takes his team, about 30 people, out for drinks and apps. This is kind of a no-no as it's going to be a significant company expense and the company is trying to cut back. Still, this isn't anywhere near enough to get him fired, just an odd choice. He ends up getting blackout drunk and sexually harassing 2 female employees on his team, asking them to sit on his lap, putting his arm around them. His behavior was recorded and via phone. Next day he has a meeting with HR and was terminated. I worked in security for a hospital, and this guy comes in and asks where to meet his supervisor because he wasn't familiar with the building yet. Everything was checking out, but we make everyone go through our weapons screening system. This dude really didn't think anything of it, but his backpack alerted on our system. It was at that moment the guy realized that he had something he shouldn't have. I'm honestly surprised he told me this, but he said he forgot he had his disassembled rifle in his backpack. The dude quickly leaves the building, and every time a firearm entered the building, we had to report it to our supervisors. After receiving the report, our supervisor quickly rushed down and started checking cameras trying to find out where he went, and escalated it to our HRO and our chief security officer. Apparently, the guy never came back, but we did confirm with the supervisor that he was supposed to meet and that it indeed was his first day on the job. It was a military backpack, so I'm assuming he was former military and just forgot it in there, but after this whole incident, my supervisor smiles and says well, this was his first and also his last day here. Crazy to think someone can just forget it in their bag though. New VP of sales starts vaping inside HQ office during the broadcasted all hands on video, all while talking like a big shot. When you said big shot, I can only imagine that he held the vape like a cigar and talked out the side of his mouth like a Chicago boss or something. Maybe a big fur coat too. He blew so much smoke, literally and figuratively. I was working in a shop, very basic shelf facing in the evenings before close. They asked me to show this new guy how it's done. I then left him with a section to sew while I continued on. Once no one was watching, he just stopped and stared blankly at it. Like almost catatonic. It was a boring, low paid but very undemanding job. But the time would still go by way faster doing it than just staring into nothing. And he didn't seem stoned. I didn't see him after that evening. He looked like a young Charles Manson though, so I was happy enough not to see him again. We were in a meeting with our team and a few execs. We had a new guy, and our manager introduced him and asked him to tell us something fun or interesting about him. He told a 5-minute story about blacking out at a tailgate at his party school. I don't think anyone told him the 30-year-old guy across the table was our very serious CIO. Worked as a chef earlier in my life. Dishwasher guy walked into the stock room and I literally watched him put a bottle of like $2 cooking mel right under his apron and walk out. I grabbed the exec chef and we confronted him. He says I wasn't stealing it, I was just going to drink it. Exec left to get security, hotel and casino, and he runs past me with a knife in his hand, grabs the bottle, uses the knife to shove the cork in and pathetically drinks about 3/4 of it. When he was done he stood up all seeming proud. I held out hand and he put the knife in my hand, which I handed off to the other dishy. Then put my hand back out and he gave me the bottle. I lightly bopped him on the head with it and said hope this rancid sheet was worth it, and then stepped aside as security dragged him out of the pit. They asked police or just toss him. I answered he lost his job over a $2 bottle of wine, just let the guy go home. Needed some help at our small warehouse, so I hired someone on Indeed. This guy was a wreck, bloodshot eyes, could barely stand up straight, showed up about an hour late because he couldn't get an Uber. He worked for about 3 hours before saying he needed to go get his antipsychotics medicine he hasn't been on in 5 days because he couldn't afford them. I gave him a ride to the pharmacy and paid for an Uber for him to get home because he wasn't feeling well enough to continue and I couldn't bring myself to leave him on the curb. He texts me the next day very apologetic and asks for a ride to work again. I went and picked him up and he looked even worse. He lives in a beat up mini camper in a trailer park. He was laying across the backseat of my pickup. He had me pull over and got out and just started vomiting on the road, so I drove him back. I paid him for all his time right there in cash plus an extra pity 20. Went out to lunch for the first day as interns after a welcome and safety sessions and some HR crap. During that training was about drinking and not being allowed to around the manufacturing floor. Dude asked for a beer at lunch. Boss asked if that was really a good idea. Kid said sure, why not. Got back to the plant. Was sent for a breathalyzer. Failed and was fired. And yes, I'm in the US. Day 1 for a brand new transfer driver. He pins a trailer to his truck to then bring it from its center down to the repair shop. For reasons beyond me, he had activated the emergency brake on the trailer. He drove all the way from the center to repair shop, roughly a 3/4 hour drive, with all 4 wheels on fire and multiple cop cars and firefighter trucks chasing after him. He pulled into the shop yard and was completely surprised, like he had no idea what had just happened. That was his first and last day. I briefly worked as a temp staging new cars for local delivery at a port, and since the facility was secure, the keys were left inside the cars between being moved off the ship to where the truckers would pick them up or the longshoremen would load them onto rail cars. A group of new hires were brought on board, and at the end of the day, the manager addressed them to say they all did a great job and to see if anybody had any questions. One guy pulled handfuls of car keys from his pockets and asked, "What do I do with these?" Keep in mind that the remotes had not yet been programmed, so the only way to figure out which key went to which car was to try every single one by hand. He did not come back the next day. Was at my first day of training. It was supposed to be a class of 8, but only 7 showed. The dept manager came in, asked where the missing person was, to which the trainer said they didn't show. Manager went in the hall and made a phone call, asking them where they were. Manager came back in the room a minute later, said they asked the missing person where they were they running late, etc. Missing person said they had applied at a different employer and they were hoping to get a call from them. Then they asked the manager if he still wanted them to come in today anyways. Manager told them not to bother. Worked in a call center for a month as a side gig on weekends. Soul crushing work. I saw a girl being trained and told she could not hit a vape multiple times. Told her trainers she wouldn't bring it to not be tempted. Kept ripping it during her first hours of the job. Got fired. It was a Weta vape. I work in aviation. 99.8% of aviation is safety sensitive and every employee is routinely piss tested for drugs and alcohol. A few years ago, we had a new hire come in and reeked of booze. Breath, sweat, everything stank of alcohol. Asked if he had been drinking, he replied yes. Kudos for honesty, but see ya later. He later admitted to me that he was nervous about beginning a new career in aviation and didn't realize the DOT didn't duck around concerning sobriety while on the job. He thought downing a hip flask of Jack in the parking lot on Monday morning would calm his nerves.